Good afternoon, everyone. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from waiting too long, from pouring energy into directions that seemed not to notice, from showing up consistently, generously, with full presence, and receiving in return a silence so complete it began, after a while, to feel like an answer. Some people know this exhaustion intimately, the specific weight of being overlooked, not dramatically, not with cruelty or intention, but in that quiet, grinding way that accumulates over days and weeks and months. The unreturned effort, the unacknowledged contribution, the feeling of speaking into a room where the acoustics seem designed to absorb your voice before it reaches anyone. And somewhere in the middle of all that silence, life also asked other things of you. Practical things, financial things, the kind of material pressures that do not pause politely while the emotional ones are being processed, bills that arrive on schedule regardless of how the heart is doing, opportunities that seem to stall precisely when they were most needed. A sense that abundance in its fullest sense, not only financial but energetic, relational, reciprocal, had somehow redirected itself away from you without explanation. This reflection is for the people sitting in that particular intersection, where the personal and the practical have both felt thin at once, where the desire for recognition and the need for material stability have been running on the same depleted reserves. Something may be shifting. Let us begin with money because it deserves to be spoken of directly, without the embarrassment that sometimes surrounds it. Money is not a trivial thing. It is not a spiritual distraction or a shallow concern. It is the practical architecture of a life, the thing that determines whether you sleep with ease or with anxiety, whether you make choices from freedom or from fear, whether you can afford to be generous or are forced by circumstance into a contracted version of yourself. To want financial stability, to want more than stability, to want genuine abundance is not greed. It is the desire for ground beneath the feet, for options, for the particular dignity that comes from not having to calculate every small decision. Some people have been in a season of calculation, of stretching, of managing carefully, creatively, with more grace than the circumstances perhaps deserved, of watching others seem to move easily through a financial landscape that has felt, for them, more like difficult terrain. And beneath the practical management, beneath the spreadsheets and the postponed plans and the quiet adjustments, there may have been a deeper question. Not when will things improve, though that question is present too, but something more personal, something that sounds in the private interior more like, am I doing something wrong? Is there something about me, about my choices, about my path that is incompatible with receiving what I need? The answer to that question, in most cases, is no. Seasons of financial difficulty are rarely evidence of personal failure. They are more often the result of timing of cycles, of systems larger than any individual, of the particular convergence of circumstances that can trap even the most capable, most diligent people in stretches of genuine constraint. And cycles, by their nature, turn. There may be movement happening right now in the practical dimension of your life movement that is not yet fully visible, but that some people may sense in the way that weather is sensed before it arrives. A slight shift in the pressure, a quality of openness in the near future that was not present in the recent past. Doors that were closed, not locked, but simply closed, and at the wrong moment that may be beginning to ease. An opportunity may be assembling itself, not loudly, not with the fanfare of something obvious, more in the way that certain things grow underground, invisibly, until the moment of emergence and then appear, seemingly suddenly, fully formed. Some people may receive unexpected news about money in the coming days or weeks, not necessarily in the dramatic, all at once way the mind tends to imagine when it hears the word large. Sometimes largeness is relative. Sometimes what arrives is not a windfall, but a resolution, a payment finally released, a project finally recognized, an effort finally compensated at the level it always deserved. Sometimes what feels enormous is not the amount itself, but the timing, the fact that it arrives precisely when the reserves were lowest and the doubt was loudest. And the relief of that, the specific relief of material pressure lifting even slightly, can feel from the inside like the world righting itself, like evidence that the effort was not invisible after all. Chuckle warm, quiet. Now let us speak about the other thing, the attention, because for many people this may be the more complicated of the two arrivals. Money, when it comes, is relatively uncomplicated in its welcome, but attention from someone who withheld it, who seemed not to see you, who moved through your shared space or shared history with a carelessness that cost you more than you let on, that is a different matter entirely. Some people have a specific person in mind right now. They know exactly who this reflection is circling, the one whose opinion carried more weight than was entirely comfortable to admit, the one whose acknowledgement was wanted quietly, persistently, with a hunger that felt slightly embarrassing in its intensity, the one who looked past you, or through you, or at you, without truly seeing, and continued about their business as though the effect of that inattention was not, in fact, considerable. Let us be honest about what it feels like to be ignored by someone who matters to you. It feels, at its worst, like a kind of erasure, like a question about your own reality. Am I here? Am I visible? Is what I bring to this space genuinely without value? Or am I simply invisible to this particular person for reasons I cannot fully access? And the mind, in the absence of information, tends to fill the gap with self-criticism, with the assumption that the fault is internal, that if you were more impressive, more certain, more whatever quality seems to be missing, the attention would have arrived naturally. This assumption is almost always wrong. There is something worth understanding about the people who withhold attention. Their withholding is rarely about you. It is almost always about them, about their own preoccupations, their own fears, their own limited capacity for presence in any given moment, about the particular emotional architecture they have built around themselves, which keeps certain things out, not because those things are unworthy, but because letting them in would require a vulnerability they have not yet learned to sustain. Some people are simply not available, not because of anything the person waiting for them has done or failed to do, but because Their availability is genuinely limited by something internal, by walls they may not even be fully aware of, by a habit of absence so ingrained it has become their default mode of moving through the world. And sometimes in ways that are difficult to predict and impossible to manufacture, something shifts in such a person. A realization arrives, a perspective changes, something that kept them contracted and unavailable begins, slowly or suddenly, to loosen, and they look up, perhaps for the first time in a long time, perhaps with eyes that have finally adjusted to a light they were previously too defended to see clearly. And what they see when they look up is you, still there, still present, having continued through the silence to be exactly and entirely yourself. Some people may be approaching a moment of being seen by someone whose seeing they had perhaps quietly stopped expecting. This can be a disorienting arrival because the heart has often done significant work in the interim to convince itself that the attention was not wanted, that the person did not matter, that the silence was preferable, actually, to the complication of their presence. And in many ways, that work is genuine. The distance does become more comfortable. The need does diminish. The self does reorganize around the absence. But then the attention arrives, and something that was reorganized carefully, effortfully, shifts again. Not necessarily back to what it was, not necessarily toward anything the practical mind would endorse, but with the particular aliveness of something real after a long stretch of managed numbness. Some people may feel in this moment a complicated mix, the warmth of finally being seen, and beneath it or alongside it, a legitimate question. Where was this attention when I needed it? What changed? And what does it mean that it arrives now in this form at this particular moment? These are intelligent questions. They deserve intelligent answers. And the answers will only emerge over time through behavior observed, through consistency, demonstrated or not demonstrated, through the slow and undramatic accumulation of evidence about what this attention actually is. For now, it may simply be enough to notice it, to receive it without immediately deciding what it means, to let it exist in the space of the uncertain, where most real things live before they become clear. There is an image worth sitting with here. A plant that has been growing in low light, not dying, surviving, adapting, developing a kind of resilience particular to things that have learned to function without optimal conditions. It grew more slowly than it might have. It reached at angles toward whatever light was available. It developed perhaps a slightly unusual shape, not the shape it would have grown into with full sun, but its own shape, specific to its particular history of light and shadow. And then the window opens, or the season changes, or someone moves the obstruction that was blocking the light without quite realizing it. And suddenly, not overnight, but with a new momentum that was not there before the growth changes, quickens, the leaves turn toward the source with an eagerness that looks to the observer almost like joy. Some people may be that plant right now, having adapted beautifully and resourcefully to a season of insufficient light and feeling in the air around them, the first genuine warmth of a change in conditions, not imagined, not hoped into existence. Real. Um, Both things at once, the material and the relational, beginning to move in a direction that feels, after the long stillness, almost disorienting in its momentum. Let us speak about what you deserve, not in the abstract motivational sense, but specifically, concretely, in the actual texture of daily life. You deserve to be compensated fairly for what you offer, not eventually, not partially, not with the implication that gratitude should substitute for substance. Fairly, fully, in a way that reflects the real value of what you bring, which has not always been reflected accurately in the material return you have received. You deserve to be seen by the people in your life, not performed for, not managed or tolerated or kept at a useful distance, actually seen with the specific attention that registers who you are rather than what you provide, with the care that shows up not just in the grand moments, but in the ordinary ones, in the small consistencies that accumulate over time into something that can be trusted. And you deserve to receive both of these things, the material and the personal, without having to diminish yourself to justify them. Without the footnote of, but perhaps I am asking for too much. Without the habitual downward adjustment of expectation that some people have learned to perform so automatically they no longer notice they are doing it. You are not asking for too much. You have, in all likelihood, been asking for too little. Uh, there is a quality to the season that may be approaching that feels different from what came before. A different texture in the air around certain possibilities, as though the resistance that characterized the recent past, the friction, the stalling, the sense of pushing against something that would not yield, is beginning to ease. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in the way that a door that has been stuck begins to give, first barely, just a millimeter of movement, and then more, and then suddenly it swings open with almost no effort at all, and you wonder why it felt so immovable for so long. Some people may find in the coming days and weeks that things begin to move, that a financial situation that has been static begins to develop, that a person who has been distant begins to turn toward, that the combination of practical and personal, the two rivers that have both been running low, begins to fill again from sources that may not yet be fully visible from the current position. Oh, this is not magic. It is not the sudden reversal of everything. It is something quieter and in many ways more sustainable, the gradual correction of an imbalance. The world beginning to reflect back at something closer to the right proportion, what has been invested into it for so long without adequate return. And so we arrive at the open question, the place where all honest reflection must eventually rest its case and return the matter to the person living the life. Something may be coming toward you. In the material dimension, a sum, a payment, a recognition of value that was long overdue. And in the personal dimension, an attention, a turning, a pair of eyes that previously looked past you, now looking directly at you with something in them that was not there before. Some people will receive these things and know immediately what to do. Others may find the receiving more complicated than the wanting because long seasons of scarcity in any form can make abundance feel unfamiliar, can make attention feel suspect, can produce, paradoxically, a reflexive resistance to the very things that were most desired. If this is you, if the arrival of good things tends to produce in you a slight vertigo, a suspicion, a waiting for the catch, then perhaps the most useful thing this reflection can offer is this. Whew, not everything good comes with a hidden cost. Some things simply arrive. Delayed, yes, later than they should have been. Perhaps not in exactly the form that was imagined, but real. And yours? The money that may be moving towards you in whatever form it takes is not a mistake. It is not temporary luck that will be corrected shortly. It may be the material world catching up with the effort you have been extending into it for longer than felt fair. And the attention that may be turning in your direction from someone whose attention you had given up on is not necessarily a trap. It may simply be someone finally arriving at a clarity that took them longer than it should have. People grow on their own timelines. Realizations land when they land, and sometimes the person who seemed most determinedly absent is simply the one whose journey towards seeing you took the longest. You have been patient. Not because patience was easy, it was not, but because something in you understood, even in the hardest stretches, that the story was not yet finished, that the account was not yet balanced, that what had been given had not yet been fully returned. And perhaps in ways that are just beginning to become visible, the balance is shifting, the money is moving, the eyes are turning. And you still here, still whole, still in possession of everything you were before the silence and the scarcity tried to convince you otherwise, are exactly where you need to be to receive what is coming. Stay open, stay grounded, and when abundance arrives in whichever form it chooses first, let yourself accept it without apology, without the diminishment, without the old reflex of making yourself smaller than what is being offered. You earned this, not as reward, not as cosmic justice, simply as the natural return of a tide that has been out for a very long time. And tides always return.